Good evening, Carl's Conversations. Good evening, Facebook. Good evening, YouTube. It's good to be with you again. Thank you so much for those of you who are here and were waiting for the broadcast to start. I am very thankful for the audience that I have and for the audience that we are earning. So I normally do this show on Saturdays, but tomorrow's I have my hands full, and I won't tell you what I have in them, but I have my hands full, and so we're gonna do the the Saturday show on Friday evening. So once again, thank you so much for joining. As you can see by the title, our topic tonight is going to be the cultural divide as it relates to our current racial climate and how do we fix it. I think that any of us who are following the racial upheaval that's going on in our nation, no matter what side you fall on that, there is definitely a divide. There are different schools of thought, and there's even been some friction in the church, outside of the church, in families, outside of families. And so Carl's Conversations was developed so that we could have a safe place to have conversations about difficult subjects. And I always try to tackle difficult subjects. So I want you to join in. I want you to comment and question as we go along. Please don't be afraid to jump in. I am your host, Carl Armstrong, and I have assembled a tremendous panel today who are going to help us have this discussion. And like I said, you can be a part. Just jump in with your questions and comments. And there's our first comment, Paulette Howard, who says good evening. And for all of y'all who don't know, that's Chris's mama. So what we're going to do, God bless you, sir, Mr. Jerron Dennis is also with us. So what we're going to do is ask our panel one by one to introduce themselves. They're going to take a few moments to tell us who they are. And we'll start with Miss Nicole E. Hello, good evening to you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Nicole Ellis, aka Coach Nick E. I'm a wife, mother, and a coach, entrepreneur, and just super excited to and honored to be here for this conversation tonight.
All right, thank you so much. Next, we have Miss Andrea.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Fair. I'm a wife, a mother of three adult children, so I'm here to chime in on this ongoing discussion so we can create a better future.
All right, thank you. And then we have Miss Heather Hutchison. Good evening, Heather.
Hey, thanks for having me, Carl. So I'm Heather Hutchison, and I live here in Stafford. I am a single mom of four kids who are all teenagers, so that's a lot of fun. And I have an organization called the Sound Mind Collective, and we do work in the civil rights arena in regards to race and also with mental health. So I'm really glad to be here.
Awesome. And now back with us, Mr. Christopher Tucker. Please take a moment to introduce yourself, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christopher Tucker. I am a former U.S. Marine, current federal employee, husband, son, brother, father, preacher of the gospel, all around Mr. Fix It. And hey, Ma.
All right. Tonight, we're going to talk about culture and race. And just to get us started, I went and got a definition of culture. And this is what I have found. Culture: the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social groups. The attitudes and behavior characteristics of a particular social group. And when we talk about culture tonight, we're really talking about the American culture. But when we say that, that is so broad because in our country, there's an amalgamation of races, ethnicities, nationalities, socioeconomic. There's a scale of very rich, very poor. So when you talk about the American culture, that is very broad. But even when you dissect those groups inside of the groups, okay, if you say a Black American culture, well, I can tell you, being a Black American from Norfolk, Virginia, my culture was very much different than my cousins who lived in DC and other family members who lived in New York City. Different cultures. So inside of the larger groups, you have those micro cultures. So the question I'm really posing to the panel and to our audience today is when we look at the cultural divide in our country right now, as it pertains to the racial issue. Are we having just as much as a cultural issue as we having a racial issue? And there's a word that I want to use that I think is playing a major, major role in what we're seeing, and that word is ignorance. And not meant to be a derogatory word. Ignorance just means that we don't know, right? We don't know. So one thing that I said in a group I was with yesterday morning, I said, I'm seeing two types of ignorance. The first type of ignorance, and I mean from my Caucasian brothers and sisters, the first type of ignorance is there's a lot I don't know about you and your culture, but I see there's a problem and I need to know. Can I lean on you? That's refreshing to me. That's therapeutic to me. I think that's a good place to be. And I'm gonna say this before I move on. I think a lot of us in the Black culture probably need to open our minds too. It's not just that we want to be understood, but we need to also understand. But then there's another type of ignorance that's dangerous. And that's the type of ignorance that doesn't know and doesn't know how much they don't know, but they speak as one having authority. That's problematic. That's problematic. So I'm going to start with Miss Andrea, and I'm going to ask you, what part does culture do you think play in our racial temperature in the country right now, according to what you see and what you've experienced?
That's a good question. Culture is so broad, but yet, like for example, I'm an African American woman in middle age who loves tennis, for example. However, there's like a cultural divide within our own race of people, different socioeconomic levels. However, one thing we all have in common as African Americans or Black people is we have the propensity to be racially profiled or stereotyped. It doesn't matter what we have in the bank or what our hobbies are or what, clubs we belong to. We do have that in common, the racism issue in this country and systemic racism, which people are denying right now as we speak, but it's there. It's been studied. Um, but culturally, I do agree that we do need to learn about each other. I feel blessed that I have a good number of friends who are of all colors, people I grew up with. And in fact, I grew up with mostly Caucasian people in suburban Philadelphia. So I'm glad that I have that experience. And then, of course, I have, African American friends. So culturally, we still have an uphill battle to fight as African Americans in this country. However, we all need to talk to each other. That's the bottom line.
Right. All right, Miss Heather Hutchison, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I actually really like your definition of the breaking down the different types of ignorance, and I do think that there is that issue at play here. And I know as a white person, I've lived in numerous places in the country. My dad was a preacher, and we moved around some. But my mother's side of the family was from deep south of North Carolina and has stayed there forever. She's the only one who ever left. And I remember even as a kid, my cousins would tease us and call us Yankees, which was, I guess, supposed to be offensive. And I would always be like, well, we live in Virginia. Like, we're not, we're not from the North. We're not Yankees. But I even remember thinking back years, later when I was older, that I didn't come from a family who was, out touting, the Confederacy or anything like that. But there is a cultural, I don't know what word you want to use, that pride, I guess, of growing up in the South. And I see it with white people as well as with Black people for different reasons. And I think that some of that is part of the issue right now, is that, with any of us pushing back against this ignorance, it becomes somehow this really personal attack for a lot of white people who feel as though we're working to strip them of their cultural identity, which is a problem and needs to be addressed as such. So I think it's pretty incredible that you've identified those two different types of ignorance and also how the culture plays into it, because I think that is playing a big role here.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting take. Mr. Tucker, what do you think about that?
I agree with all of that, especially what Heather's saying. I was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. And so obviously there is a very unique culture um, that comes from the Black experience down there. But, and thinking about how do we fix this, right? There's a quote by Dr. King that comes in my mind where he says that there's nothing in this world more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. So, it takes effort in this day and age um, to remain constantly and consistently blind to other cultures, other experiences, other perspectives that drives a group of people or a subgroup of people. And so I think that in order to move from this place where we are, it requires understanding, it requires love, and it requires an openness to listen and to learn. Because I've recently found that a lot of people are listening, but they're not willing to learn. So, and also for those of us in some of these different subgroups, right? Whether we're Black, white, poor white, whatever, we can't get tired of teaching, because I found that a lot of the millennials that I talk to, in which I am a millennial, and Carl can probably tell you, I'm the first one to talk about, well, here's what the millennials think, is getting that they're getting very tired of trying to explain why you should not be ignorant of this particular subject or anything. So we also can't get tired of teaching and relating our perspective and relating our experience to people, especially when they come to us with an openness and a willingness to learn.
All right. All right. Miss Nicole E., what do you think about that?
I think what everybody has said thus far hits it right on the head. But one thing I would like to add is if you go to any other country, right, the majority identify with that cultural set. When you come to America, like you said, there's so many cultures and then there's subcultures. I think the majority, with us being such a diverse country, does not identify with the quote unquote American culture. And so we are now wrestling against what does that even mean for us? And I think because based on geographical location, if you were in the South, if you were raised in one particular area, one background, it really does set how you treat people, how you interact with people. And so I think that, as it's already been mentioned, those conversations need to be had. I like what Chris said about we can't get tired of teaching. The word that comes to mind is grace. We have to continue to extend this grace, giving people what they don't deserve. So when people are acting ignorant, we have to at least be able to pull back and dig a little deeper. And so I think platforms like this, having these conversations, can have us dive a little bit deeper into what culture divides we are facing.
Wonderful. Heather said something that just sparked me. And Heather, I'm going to start with you with this question. Um, you said something about, if I got it right, if I understood it right, when it comes to that cultural thing, maybe some of our white brothers and sisters feel like this movement now is kind of taken away some of the foundations. We've heard President Trump say that, and this is not a political thing. This is what he said. You know, they're trying to tell you that our nation is bad, our history is wrong, down that line. And I will speak for myself, and I know I speak for several others who work with me, that not that we're trying to say that it's all bad. We're trying to say that we were told a lot of lies. And you take, for instance, some of the Confederate monuments. I could understand how a Caucasian person who can trace their lineage back to the Civil War could look at that and have pride, even though they may not be racist, because that's their bloodline. You know, that person on that horse, on that statue, that was my great uncle, my great great grandfather. Well, for somebody like me, who can say, well, that guy was a part of the enslavement of my great great uncle, my great great grandfather, and I don't appreciate that. So the question I have for Heather is, as you talk to your family, to your friends, Is that what you're seeing, that maybe they think that something is being taken away from them by the current movement?
Mhm. Yeah. So I've, the people who are in my regular life, I vet pretty carefully just to keep my, emotional sanity. But when I'm out in either on social media or more in the, you know, extending out into a white people land a little more, I do sense that a lot. And in fact, as a white person, that's one of my questions that I have for my fellow white people is there seems to be um, a fear as though, fighting for equal rights and equal, expectation for justice is somehow going to take something from them. And I'm not even sure that the average white person could articulate what that is that they feel is going to be taken from them. Um, but I'm noticing that a lot of the responses continue to point back to ignorance. And so, when we're talking about the issues with the Confederate monuments, I'm very quick to say I live in an area that, literally Spotsylvania County, the sign in the county says, welcome to, I don't know, the crossroads of the Civil War or something. And no one is storming those battlefields and trying to rip down any of those plaques. What we're doing is working to dismantle the lies that were not to serve propaganda pieces to honor people who oftentimes their families didn't even want them to be honored. And so, unfortunately, white people have bought into a lie that serves them more than it serves the Black people. And so, by giving up that lie, I guess it feels scary.
Wow. Andrea, are you seeing that when you're in your observation or in your conversations, are you seeing something similar, or do you see a different picture?
Yeah, I like what Heather said. I agree. Like, as someone, I now live, as you know, in Northern Virginia, but growing up in Pennsylvania and still having these friends of, mostly white from my childhood, I'm seeing literally some of them who are holding on to what I don't know, and I'm seeing others who are really, digging in and diving into Ta-Nehisi Coates' books and studying and knowing more than I do right now. Some of them just trying to be engaged. But yeah, I do see something like it was like a threat or a fear of life as they know it ending. And I'm saying they, I'm being general. Not everyone is thinking like that, but it's disappointing. And I am seeing that with friends and some friends who I do need to talk to, but I'm really mad with right now, because I'm seeing they have no desire to understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think that's part of my frustrations too. Nicole, do you see that, or are you seeing something different?
No, I guess it depends on who I'm talking to. I know when I'm talking to colleagues, and I've even had to go to senior leadership and say, look, I have to acknowledge that with everything happening in the world, I'm exhausted. And we got to have some kind of candid conversation so that we can work through this. So I met with certain white people who are like, hey, let's have these conversations. But I do agree. I love what Heather said about, if this lie was all you knew, right? That's your truth. For somehow now all of a sudden they think we're robbing them of their truth, even if their truth hurt other people. And my thing is, I can find out and have pride in who I am, but I have to at least acknowledge the pain, the hurt, the anguish that my history, my truth has inflicted on other people, so that we can at least bridge the gap. I think the scary part is the denial. That's the scary part.
Wow. All right, Chris, what about you? What are you seeing on that front?
I think I'm seeing the same thing that Sister Nicole is seeing, especially when it comes down to the denial. And for me, I think I found that a lot of the reason for the denial is because they cannot literally fathom the depth of the hurt. They can't fathom how that one incident or this institution of slavery, how the institution of Jim Crow, the psychological effect that is still having on a lot of Black people in America. And so because they have no frame of reference for that pain, it's easy to say that it doesn't exist. And so for me, that in a lot of the conversations that I'm having, that's where the denial is coming from. They have no frame of reference. So because I have no frame of reference, it's easy to say that it just doesn't exist and you're just making this all up.
Wow. I'm gonna go back to something that Heather said in the very first interview that I had with her. This is back in May. I think it was in May. And also I heard you say this speaking at the NAACP event, Heather. And she talked about our Caucasian brothers and sisters taking the lead and having very difficult conversations with their own families, their own friends, and their own circles, and challenging some of these misnomers and these untrue things that have been taught and been said. And so I guess this is a two-part question. Number one, this question is not just for Heather, but for everybody. I'm going to start with Andy. Number one, have you engaged your circle about these issues? And number two, if you have, has there been any progression or regression since your first engagement? I'll start with you, Andy.
Yes, I've had engagement, and as simple as the phrase Black Lives Matter, and the phrase is rather Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, with a longtime friend who I've known since we were, teenagers, and she still doesn't get it even now. However, and I had to explain that to that person, um, as Christians, I don't believe that just Black Lives Matter, but this is a hard concept for some people to want to grasp. We believe all lives matter. However, Black lives are in danger. And I also make the analogy of an abused woman, for example, just an example. If a woman says she's abused, um, and no one is there to witness it, do we not believe her, and say, oh, but he's a nice guy. He gives to his church. He does this and that. It's abusive to not believe hundreds of people making the same claim, just as you would not want to disbelieve a woman who says she's being abused. So I make that analogy when I try to explain it to people.
Thank you, Chris Tucker. So, in your walk, have you engaged your circle, your family, and have you seen regression or progression in those conversations?
Absolutely. But first, I want to say, Sister Andrea, I'm going to use that. Uh, because and honestly, I think that may be a conversation in and of
I was
itself
thinking the
right
same
there.
thing.
But right. Especially like when it comes down to how we believe women and not believe women, but I'm gonna stop while I'm ahead on that. But yeah, I have engaged people, and I have two quick examples. One, I have two white friends that I see literally every week, and after the George Floyd murder, I literally called them up and said, "Hey guys, look, I need to talk to you guys." And I literally poured my heart out as to why this is so important. And their response, their collective response, hit me in a way that I've never been hit before. And they simply said, "What do I need to do?" And that was it. And I mean, to be honest, I wasn't expecting for them to say that. I was expecting for them to say, "Oh man, like we hear you, we understand you." But the fact that they said, "What do we need to do?" To be honest, it caught me off guard. But looking better, I was like, oh my goodness, you guys really are my friends, and was able to take this friendship to a whole nother level of brotherhood. Um, and then two, my second example is a Black friend of mine who he said, listen, I'm not well versed in Black history and the history of our people in this country, but you are, and I know you are. I need you to teach me. And all of this has had to show me that I can't give him the nice parts of Black history anymore. I have to give him the ugly underbelly of Black history too. And that has elicited another response too. Is like, whoa, I didn't know that hearing Law and Order at the Republican convention meant what it meant something other than, oh yeah, we're just gonna make sure that we abide by the rules. No, there's a racist undertone to the term law and order,
Yes.
and to which he just became knowledgeable. So as his mind is like, oh my goodness, now I understand. So there's definitely been some progression on both sides with both my black friends and my white friends.
That's awesome. Nicole, how about you? Have you engaged your circle? Are you seeing progression or regression?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I had conversations with senior leadership at my job. And I'll have to say, I see progression in those individual relationships. And one of the reasons why it was so important for me to have those conversations is because we're often known to, the term is code switch, right? We have to put on the happy face and have the polished tone and articulate in such a way that they know we're not aggressive, right? Well, I wasn't going to do no code switching. Okay. You was going to get all of this. And so I had to reach out to them, and I poured out in an email after the George Floyd shooting, and I'm just like, look, I'm exhausted, but more importantly, what is the company doing about this? Because every time I look around, I see a lot of black and browns, so we can't pretend that we don't exist. We can't pretend that this is not affecting us mentally and emotionally. We are tired, right? And so that conversation, I was pleasantly surprised by the exchange, the compassion, and then on a larger scale, to be able to have those conversations at a staff meeting, and then it just started, becoming a regular thing. Let me check in. How are y'all doing today? If there is a riot, if there was a protest, they did not ignore those things. Now, do we have some people on the team that say, I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of all the protesting and stuff. Yeah, you tired, but you just tired because it's inconveniencing you. We ain't tired. We're tired of dying. We're tired of, all these other things. And so on one level, it's progressing
Mhm.
and allowing the exchange to happen. On the other hand, you see the snide comments from those who choose to be in ignorance that I'm tired of this. I just want to get back to business as usual. But we want to too. But we don't have a business as usual. So we're going to have these conversations.
I think that we understand where Nick is coming from. All right, Heather, it's kind of unfair because I know you have engaged your circle, but what I want to know is the progress, progression or regression.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely been progress, and this hasn't, in my life, it's not new conversation. So, the people who are around me have been blessed or cursed, I don't know, with hearing me talk about this for years. It's made me definitely bolder in some ways, just because, as we're all aware, let's just talk about it. Unfortunately, Mr. George Floyd's death, what became one of those incidences that for a lot of white people was the first incident of, dear God, I don't really know what to say, because we didn't yet have his supposed, whatever criminal rap sheet where they could pull from and try to discount what happened. There were a lot of people who all of a sudden woke up and said, we might have a problem. And so it became a little more normal to talk about it in more public spaces rather than just my more personal and private relationships with Black friends and with white friends and with my family as well. What's been cool is to see my family to continue to grow. My dad is my family lives in Charlottesville, which is where I lived for a long time, and we all know what happened there. And my dad and mom, two of their closest friends, are an African American couple, and he's a very highly sought after cardiologist and a surgeon, and she is a very high ranking lawyer who has her sights on, there's a cat, on a Supreme Court. And after a conversation with my dad, when he came and he heard me speak at the NAACP event, when we were back at home, he said, what I haven't done is called and asked Thomas to forgive me. And they're very close. I mean, these people have been in my life since I was a toddler. And he said, we've had lots of conversations since George Floyd's death, as they normally do. And they've talked about race. But my dad said, what I wasn't aware of until I heard what you said was that there have been times where he has given me a pass, and I need to ask his forgiveness. And my dad, was very choked up about it. And he said, I promise you that I will do it in the morning, because I don't ever want him to give me that pass. I love him and I want him to call me out. And so that blew my mind, because this is my dad who's taught me a lot about, loving people for who they are, and to feel like that he learned something from me that then translated into a very personal relationship was really powerful.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. All right. I'm going to turn the corner here to an ugly subject, but we got to talk about it. And just before I do that, I just want to say to the audience, listen, I know you guys are probably mesmerized with the with the height of this conversation, but please don't stop commenting. Don't stop asking questions. If you want to throw something out there for us to chew on, please do so. We want you to be engaged. And also, don't forget to go to YouTube to Carl's Conversations, spelled just like it is in my name tag, and go ahead and like and or subscribe, and also go to my Facebook page and follow me. Okay. All right. Let's go to Kenosha, Wisconsin. We saw the ugly incident with the police shooting. Of course, I knew when I saw the video, Kenosha's going to burn tonight. And not because we have a bunch of unruly people who just don't want to do right, but it goes back to something that Nicole said. We're tired and we're frustrated, and it appears that nobody's listening. I had a conversation with a man, a Caucasian brother, at work 2 days ago, and he said, "So what's up with all the craziness in the streets with the BLM movement?" I said, I can't speak for all of them, but I believe that what they're saying is, "Do you see me now? Do you see me?" I said, "Here's the problem, brother. You guys are inconvenienced and uncomfortable. But for us, we just saying join the crowd. We live in inconvenience and uncomfortability all of our lives. And we put on the happy face and come to work in these professional environments. And we don't talk about the pain because it's not corporate." Right? So I'm done talking, but let me go ahead and ask a question. I'm going to start with Mr. Tucker. We saw Kenosha get ugly. It went from protest to burning, to the armed militia showing up, to militia people shooting folks, to a nation who has jumped on and has become way more vocal about the division. What part did the culture of America play in that? And what, Mr. Tucker, do you think is driving some of the visceral hatred that we see?
Okay. Can I be as honest as I
That's
feel?
why we're on Carl's Conversation. I want you to go ahead and talk how you really feel.
America created it, and now America can't deal with its own child in its own house. And I say that because I think about my 4-year-old that's upstairs, getting put to bed right now. I'm raising him a certain way, right? And it gets to a point where I think all of us who have had kids, or all of us have been kids, have said, when you feel like you can't abide by my rules, then it's time to go, right? Well, America created this monster. America spoiled this monster, gave it whatever it wanted, and strengthened it. And now it can't reel it back in to say you need to stop. So as I look at what happened, I'm 33. Jacob Blake could have been me, right? That could have been my 4-year-old son sitting in the back seat. So just like I could have been George Floyd, well, my 4-year-old saying, "My daddy changed the world." The only way America is going to fix this problem is by acknowledging the role it played. Turning on Michael Jackson, while man in the mirror play and cry his own eyes out while staring in the mirror. That's the only way it's going to get done. And I think somebody said in the comments earlier, until America acknowledges, Germany had to acknowledge what they did to the Jewish people. South Africa had to acknowledge what they did to their own people. Until America acknowledges what it has done to those who are supposed to be citizens of this country, it will not change. We can protest, we can do everything we want to, but until they look themselves in the face and acknowledge it, it'll all be for nothing.
Andy, what role do you think American culture played in what happened in Kenosha? And what do you think is driving some of the visceral hatred that we see?
That's a loaded question, but a good question. I think first, this country was built on the economic system of slavery. So with that, came the, oppression of people of color and stereotypes and things that we still fight to this day in 2020. So I agree with Mr. Tucker. America started this, not intending to be a problem. I don't think the founding fathers foresaw, the 1900s when we'd start making changes and civil rights protests and things like that, where we would be treated as equals, as people of color. And also, another problem that's created is when a Black man is shot, whether he's killed or not, he looks, people check, as Heather indicated, his rap sheet, his background. It's irrelevant. It's abhorrent if any person is shot in police custody and killed. I don't care what color they are. So for us, it's just that this country jumps to a stereotype of, or a preconceived notion of what a Black person is. And there is racial profiling with people of color. And I'll close out on this. I'm the mother of 3 adult children. 2 of them are Black men. They're grown, they're adults, they're smart, they're successful. I still worry about them. So we need to fix this problem.
Criminal background or not. Heather, what role do you think American culture played in Kenosha, and what do you think is driving this visceral hatred that we see?
I'm going to follow Mr. Tucker's example and do my best to be articulate and not irritated. I tanked after this happened. When George Floyd was murdered, I was already, I was already there. He was, another person in a long line of people that I had been paying attention to. When this happened, and then, the next piece happened with the 17-year-old white young man in the same town with the same police force, and very different headlines and very different responses. I tanked. It's so blatantly obvious that it would be laughable except for the human cost. I actually cheered when I saw that on the remnants of the correctional facility, it had been spray painted, do you hear us now? Because I Mr. Carl, I saw one of your lives where you were pleading, with other African Americans to stop with the rioting and looting. And I agree. However, there's a part of me that says, what else? Like, what is left? What is left to get the attention of the American public? I don't know. I do know, actually, and it probably would be a whole bunch of people coming out with armed and cause a huge issue. And to be honest, if the Black people of our society decided they wanted to do that, white people have something coming to them that they can't comprehend, to be quite honest. We are lucky that has not happened, because I don't know that white people in general would have had as much patience for as long as the Black community has. I do think that the response and the difference in the portrayal of the two young men, who both had criminal records, by the way, which again is irrelevant for the one who was shot. But I think that this comes back to what you were saying, Carl, about the cultural issue. I believe all of us at our core, because we're humans, have some level of humanity. We're just created that way, right? And so, if as white people, we really acknowledge that this is a problem and it's a problem that's happening outside of the fact that maybe these are people deserving of this behavior, if we really consume that and allow it to digest into our psyches, then not only is this abhorrent, but it could possibly happen to us, and we have to do something about it, and we are responsible. And I think for the majority of the white public, that is too big of a burden to bear. And it's horrific, and it makes me furious at white America, because I think, like what Mr. Tucker said, that's the only thing that's going to fix this. But I think that there's still this level of self preservation that exists in the white community of, oh, thank God he had a criminal record, because if he didn't have a criminal record, then what are we going to say? Oh my gosh, thank goodness that he was a bad guy, or, well, he shouldn't have been there. He was out too late, or, well, a long time. And my response constantly is, if you lost someone to cancer and I walked in to the funeral and said, I'm really sorry that your Aunt Becky died, but I know that she and Jimmy were snorting lines of coke or doing blah, 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 whatever a few years ago. And I'm sorry that happened to you, but, oh, well, maybe she deserved it. I mean, white people would lose their minds, but that's exactly what's happening. And I think it's the only thing white people have left that they're trying to put between themselves and absorbing the full brunt of the reality of this is a us problem. So I don't want to say burn it down, but
I'm gonna make myself really clear here, and I'm glad you brought up what I said, and I meant what I said. What I was telling the young people is, listen to Uncle Carl. I understand how you feel. Moment of transparency. After Mr. Floyd's murder, for 8 consecutive days, my wife and I cried on the way home from work. We worked together. Cried at the dinner table, cried in the bed, and cried on the way to work. We eat lunch together, and we cried 8 consecutive days, and that includes weekends too. For a couple of days, I didn't do anything on social media because I had violent anger. I haven't been that angry in years. I'm not going to say on air what my flesh wanted to do. Some people may change their opinion of me, but it was not of Christ. So I want to make it clear. I understand what would cause someone to burn this joker down. Heather, I get it. But the point I was trying to make to the youngsters is it is counterproductive to the movement. I will also say this. When I say counterproductive to the movement, I mean you have some people who are on the fringes, and that type of thing will scare them off where they could be your help. But I'm not naive enough to not realize that with some, it will not matter what we do. Colin Kaepernick taking a knee peacefully because it offended some people's sense of patriotism. But I tell people in a heartbeat, don't tell me nothing about that flag that's drenched all in our blood. We fought every war this country has had. Your ancestors came back as heroes. My ancestors came back as dirty, nasty niggers. Let's get it right. So I put my happy face back on. Nikki, I didn't mean to steal your thunder. Hold on, Chris. I'm gonna come. I want you to hold that, brother, because I'm gonna let Nikki in on this, and I'm gonna come right back to you. Nikki, what part do you think culture played in Kenosha, and what do you think is fueling this visceral hatred?
So what everybody has said has been again spot on. I think one, we because America is not admitting it's wrong, uh, when we hear statements like "Make America Great Again," it was built on the back of slaves. So when was it ever great for Black people? When we have narcissistic leadership and narcissistic people operating in ignorance, where they can make comments about the 17-year-old who killed those people, saying, well, they should have been in the house. The problem is that we have people operating with the ideal that somehow everyone else is inferior and that we have tainted their greatness, if you will. And the reality is, for all of us, Black and Browns, this country hasn't been great. When we look at what our ancestors have gone through, and what we look at is 2020, and we're still going through. The problem is leaders in place aren't acknowledging the sins of their fathers. And so it's like, go back to what it used to be. Well, it wasn't good for me. My ancestors, I mean, yours might have been okay. And so as long as this constant um, thriving of let's get back to what we used to be, dismissing what people in this country who built this country went through, is going to always be a problem. So we can't walk around and act like everything was great. Let's get back to the old days. Well, once upon a time, Blacks didn't even count as a full person. So
What,
when was it great?
what was great about that? Mr. Tucker, go ahead, sir.
Well, first of all, I want to piggyback on what you said about it having some unchristian thoughts, because like yourself, I am a preacher, and I tell people on air what I thought. I told my mom I want them to leave. I want the people who are riding to leave what they left us back in the day. They bombed our churches, bombed theirs. They bombed our house, burned theirs. But I had to go back and repent, because, like you said, at the end of the day, it didn't work for them. So we can't expect that type of same thing to work for us. But like you said, do understand. But something Miss Andrea said, America
Yes,
was
sir.
built on economics, right? And that was a comment that was made about the caste system in America. And I really want us to talk about that, because I believe that goes right to the heart of what it is. And like I said, now you talking about messing with people's money. And like everybody else, don't mess with my money. Right? So for me, you look at the economics of our society. Black and brown people make less than our white, and in many cases, Asian counterparts. Let's just be honest, right? Then when we break it down even further, going into a little bit of intersectionality, break it down by gender. Black women make even less than Black men, right? Even though Asian women make more than white women, right? Even though in many cases, Asian men make more than white men. So I absolutely believe that this ultimately comes down to dollars and cents. As long as I have the economic upper hand on you, I have all other upper hands. I have the political upper hand because I have more money to throw money behind my choice of candidate. I have more money to throw behind my schools. Therefore, my schools are better. I have money to throw behind the healthcare in this community as opposed to healthcare in that community. So I absolutely believe that economics that Ms. Andrea was talking about has definitely created a caste system that, whether intentionally or unintentionally, has forced Black and brown people to the lowest rungs of the ladder. And to know that it's going to cost that same amount of money to bring them out of that is threatening. And I think that may go back to what Ms. Heather's talking about. This is what they may feel that they be losing: money. And money is power.
Amazing. I'm going to throw a curveball in here. All right. And this is going to be an open one. So I'm going to paraphrase a post that I saw day before yesterday. A man posted, and it was a rather long post, but I'm going to shorten it up, that there really is not a police brutality problem, and blacks should not be afraid of police if they raise the children right. So the real problem is in the black community, there's a lack of the black father. And because there's a lack of the black father, the black children, especially the black males, have never been disciplined and don't respect authority. So when they get stopped by the white police, therefore, there's the problem because they're not being used to being told what to do. But he said that him and his boys did not fear the police because he was there and they learned how to respect his authority first. And that was written by a black man. So we talked at the beginning of the conversation about culture, right? The major groups of culture and then the micro groups inside of that. And when I saw that, I wasn't surprised because I know black people who think like that. So that I wasn't surprised. I just was entertained as they whipped him in the comments. I'm going to leave that one open. Who wants some of that first? Just take it off mute. Go and say what you got to say.
Okay. So something Heather said earlier. I keep quoting Heather. I too was a single mother, Heather. I was divorced and I raised 3 kids single, and I got married a few years ago.
Oh, yes.
Can
you
you
very
guys hear
well.
me? Okay. So as a single mother, 2 sons and a daughter, I put foot to ass. Excuse my French. You know, I'm Christian, but I was a disciplinarian. They were respectful. They still are. And in my case, I was a single mother in household, but my children had a father. So, you know, it's not like they didn't have that influence, you know, visits and summers and stuff like that. However, that's discipline is not the problem. They are stereotyped. My sons have been stereotyped. I've been stereotyped. And I make the joke, it's not funny, but I'm like, I play tennis. What do you pull me over for? You know, that kind of thing. Like, it's because I'm black, you know. So yeah, it doesn't matter how well disciplined they are or well behaved or one of my sons teaches Bible study at ODU in Norfolk. So come on, you know, so it's racial profiling, plain and simple, and that's what we have to educate people about in this country.
And before the next person take it off of mute, let me just throw my 2 cents in. Now, of course, we teach our children to be respectful of police officers. But I will tell you, I've lost it with a cop. Because sometimes what you feel like is, what are you bothering me for now? I got pulled over in Virginia Beach in the first precinct, right on Lynn Haven Parkway, for a lane violation. I never heard that before. I said, sorry, I don't know what that is. He says, well, your car is supposed to stay perfectly in the center of the lane. You drifted to the left to the dotted line. And I looked at him, I said, you know, when I recognized your lights, I looked at your car in my rearview mirror and you were actually on the line. He didn't like that. And then as we're going through the stop, he tells me, Mr. Armstrong, I smell marijuana in your car. And I lost it. I said, you're a liar. You can't smell marijuana because I don't use marijuana. I'm the only one who drives this vehicle. You are a liar. I said, I'm going to tell you right now, if you try this with me today, you are not going to be famous before the sun goes down. I am not afraid of you. I don't have a record. And it's just not going down like this. So that's some of what you see. And it looks like rebellion, but some of us are just sick and tired. So who wanted to bite on that a little bit? I know you're itching over there, Mr. Tucker. Go ahead.
Now that I done prayed, I can because and I'm serious. Those facial expressions were seriously prayers. Lord, tame my tongue, because I am the product of a single parent, right? And that's a slap in the face to me.
To your mother too.
That's a slap in the face too. I was just gonna say, and that's a slap in the face to my mother, who worked very hard to get me where I am. And I tell her all the time, I am where I am standing on your shoulder, and all of the other strong women that have had sacrifices for me to get where I am. So no, it's not an issue of not having a father, because I'm teaching my son being present in his life. The same things my mother taught me with my substance abusing father, physically, emotionally abusive father who was absent, didn't teach me, but my mom did. So what does that have to do? Now, admittedly, studies have shown that when fathers are there in the house, there are, certain things, are better, right? Kids are more likely to finish school, are less likely to be sexually active during that formative years and all of this other stuff. Got it, yes. But at the same time, what about my mother? What about Miss Andrea? What about all these other people who did it by themselves, and their children turned out fine? I would dare to say they turned out better than you. So no, dude, no, don't. Long story short, don't even come around here with that. Don't even don't even come around here with that.
I think we understood that very well. Before we move on, anybody else want to have their 2 cents on that one? Go ahead, Nicole.
I just want to say quickly to say that there's no police brutality, we would see equal treatment against all races. And so anytime a white young man, I think this was what, a year or two ago, could go into a black church and shoot up people and then have a vest put on them and escorted into the car, taken to the fast food restaurant, and then taken to the jail, whereas a black person can't even sleep in her bed, when someone can't even go into the store and get some lemonade. You know what I mean? Like, and if you're going to say there is no police brutality, then everyone, black, brown, and white, will be treated the same for every traffic stop. This will be a non-issue. But the fact that people are being shot for a traffic stop, not making it home, trying to go and pick up something to eat, and yet a 17-year-old can shoot people, go home, walk past the police officers. There is a issue that started long before 2020, and people are drunk with power. They're using their inferiority complex to now bully people with these weapons. And I'm not saying everybody, because there are some good cops out here in these streets that help keep us safe, and we bless God for them. However, there are people who are using that power and they're abusing it. And so to say that it has something to do, and I took a little offense because I was a single mother for 10 years, and my daughter just graduated from college. Hallelujah.
That's right. Amen.
and you can catch all these good hands if you try to say it's justified to hurt her because she had an absentee. No, not in these streets. Not on today. And I'm saved. Y'all love the Lord. Hallelujah. Amen.
Yes, bless his name. Heather, you were quite amused, huh? Okay, now there was in this topic today, I asked a question: how do we fix it? And that's where I'm going here. And Heather, I'm going to start with you on this one. The question I want to ask is, what are we teaching our children? The bottom line is, when we talk about culture, part of our culture is what we teach our children and how we teach them, right? That's part of what makes us who we are and how we are. So much of who we are is because of what happened in our formative years. So the question is, what are we teaching our children? And I'm talking especially as it pertains to race relations and how we treat people in general. What are we teaching the children, and how is it similar and or different than what you were taught by your parents? Heather, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So for myself personally, this has been a conversation that has gone on, since I first started having kids. My oldest is almost 19 and my youngest is 12. And it's a continual conversation. And I think I think this happens a lot for white people. I think when it comes to talking about race, right, we can, at some level, we can opt out. I think a lot of white people want to opt out because it's not a fun conversation. I was in the car with all four of my kids soon after the murder of George Floyd, and I think my youngest son, who's almost 14, was asking questions because he had seen it on his own social media, and so we were having candid discussions. And my daughter, she's the youngest, she's the 12-year-old. She was saying, I don't want to talk about this anymore, and I said, I understand, and I'm sorry that it's painful, but he asked a question, and I was doing it age appropriate, sharing the things that had happened and why this had happened, and some of the stuff that was surrounding why this happened in the first place. But I think that can be an easy out for white families, is that it is a difficult conversation. It is an emotional conversation. If your child, you have a sensitive child who pushes back at any level, you can stop talking about it, because you don't have to warn your children when they go out of the house that they could be in danger. And so, we can avoid it at some level if we want to. But for myself, I was raised by a father who was a pastor, and we didn't have much money, and our church was incredibly, I mean, it had every socioeconomic class and every color in it. And so whether they recognized it or not, my parents instilled at me from a very early age a sense of justice for every person, which has continued and is showing forth in my life today. And so I think what I do differently than my parents is there's just a lot more conversation. There has to be. My kids are exposed to stuff online all the time. They come to me now when they see the Snapchat garbage that people in the local schools that they attend are sharing and laughing. They report it to me and want to know why, this is being allowed to happen, and asking questions of why this is happening in, the houses where this is happening. I think we have a responsibility as white people, even more so maybe than Black people, because obviously none of us white people want to think that our children are the ones who are going to grow up and be racist, but somebody's their mama out there, right? So we have a responsibility to not cage it or not pretty it up, I guess, is what I would say, for our families and for our children, because the reality is not pretty. And the only way we are going to have children who grow up to be adults who are going to do something different than what's happened before is for them to know the real truth. And I think it's not a one-time conversation. It can't be. It's an ongoing, this is happening and this is happening and this is why this is happening. We have a friend who just got out of jail recently, who my children know very closely, and he is not a white young man. And I was involved in his case, and it was a disaster. And I was able to very clearly lay out a lot of the things that went wrong and why. And it was appalling to my kids, even at this age. They're able to grasp that like, to them, it's just, simple black and white justice. Like, that makes no sense. And they're starting to comprehend that it doesn't make sense. And this is the way that it is, and it's a problem. And I think we have a responsibility to share that and work to set aside our own bias or our own childhood or our mama or our aunt or our, meemaw, what that person says, and allow us to grab control of our households and raise our children up in the way that we want them to go, because it has power.
It does. And listen, Andy, I'm going to come to you next, but I want to tell the audience, I really want to hear from you too. Please add in the comments what you're teaching your children, and how does it differ, or maybe it's very similar to what you were taught, especially as it pertains to race relations. All right, Andy, how about you?
One thing I don't think we were talked to as much as I've talked to my kids, and I'm not taking a lot of credit for talking a whole ton to mine. I just would let them know when things happen. But one example I have that was funny that my father did years ago. I was raised by two parents in suburban Philadelphia, Westchester, Pennsylvania, and we lived in a mostly white neighborhood. And my dad was cutting the grass one day, and somebody came up and asked him for his number so he can cut his grass. He didn't know my dad was the homeowner. He thought he was the lawn guy or whatever. So my dad, being funny, you know, gave him a fake number and said, "Yeah, call me. I'll cut your grass." You know, my dad was a clown, but he would tell us about issues like that. And then later on, we got older. He would tell us things that were where it was serious. He was in the corporate world, and the racism or him being kind of phased out when he got older. He's now deceased now, but by younger people, they could pay less, that kind of thing. Or he'd go to London for a vacation and but tell them he was working in the yard, so they wouldn't think he had like a luxurious non-work life. It's like, but for me, yeah, I think they just showed us examples, and they should. But I think we are talking a lot more because we're seeing it on video. That's what I think is happening now.
Wow. How about you, Nicole? What are you teaching your children, and how does it differ or similar to what you were taught?
Well, I know me and my husband had just the tough conversation of sharing with our kids what's going on. We have three kids, one adult daughter, a son, and a young daughter. And it's tough because we had to have conversations about how to engage with the police. We also had to have those conversations about what's happening, and again, making sure it's age appropriate. And I think, like everyone has already said, we're talking about it more because it's more prevalent. We see it, it's in our face. Growing up, I mean, my dad was pretty much like, look, don't be speeding, be respectful, don't hang out with the wrong crowds. And I think the first time I got stopped by a police officer as a teenager in Northern Virginia, because that's where I'm from, just because we were in a group of five or more. Um, and we weren't making any ruckus. We were just going to the pizza place, and we were stopped. So that was one incident. It was like, okay, it's five of y'all, too many of y'all. What? Really? One incident, me and a few friends were going to a park, and because of the type of car that my friend was driving, we were pulled over and hassled. And so to go back to our parents and have those conversations, like, look, this was unfair, but they also were not as frequent as what is happening now.
Mm.
And so I feel like we're having those conversations more than we would care to, but they're necessary. And it's sad, but we almost have to teach our kids how to survive. And that's different than showing respect.
Wow. Thank you. How about you, Mr. Tucker?
Um, Again, my son is 4, so I haven't had to teach him anything yet. But what I was taught was the same thing that Sister Nicole was saying. Hey, be respectful. Don't do this. Don't do that. If you get stopped, do whatever they tell you to do. But here recently, and Brother Carl, I shared this with you in our private conversation, that here recently, I have come under conviction in a different way. And because as a Christian, right, my Bible tells me that I'm made in the image of God. And that has been that has been reburned into me. Genesis 1:26. For those who want to go read it, what God said, let us make man in our own image, after our own likeness. And so I have to look at everyone, and I admonish everyone to look at each other as the image of God in which he was created. Yes, he's imperfect. Yes, she's imperfect. Nobody's there yet. Everybody has their prejudice and their biases. But can we recognize the humanity in each other? Can we go even deeper than that and recognize the little piece of God that is in all of us and interact? Can that little piece of God that's in me talk to and interact with that little piece of God that's in you. If we can do that, now the conversation has been elevated from all of the other stuff, right? Because now we're talking on a more transcendent plane. Now we're talking about stuff that's going to last long after we're here. And what's going to stand long after we're here is, how did I treat you while I was here?
Right.
How did we interact with each other while we were here? Because at the end of the day, that's the legacy that we pass on to our children. Because they interact with their environment how they saw us interact with ours. And if we're not interacting with them right, then they're not going to interact with theirs right. Goes back to what a study by the APA said, that, Black kids are viewed as 5 years older than what they really are. That's scary for me. My son is 4 years old and almost 4.5 feet tall. That's tall for a 4-year-old.
That's right.
Really tall. I took him
Really
to the
tall.
doctor and they walked in the door and they said, Jesus, he's tall. And so, yeah, whenever we're out, like we were in the grocery store earlier today, I had him right on my hip. No. Why? Because I ain't got time for nobody to look at my 4-year-old and think he's 6. But in the meantime, can the little piece of God that's in me, can the image of God that's in me talk to the image of God that's in you? And that's what we have to do.
All right. We're going to wrap on this question. I'm going to ask this question, and it's going to be our final finale as we wrap up. Thank you guys already. I do respect your time. How do we fix it? We know that there's a cultural divide. We know that there's a serious racial problem. It's not new. Social media has just, I think it was Will Smith that said racism is not new. It's just recorded, it's just televised. You know what I mean? It's all over everywhere. And one thing that I'm saying to people, and I said it to a couple of my Caucasian brothers this week, this is nothing new to us. But what I want you to consider is 2 things. Number one, can you just imagine how much of this happened that was never recorded? And even though it was reported, it was never believed, because Mr. Good Honest Policeman said he didn't do it. I said, I want you to consider something else too. We have never tried to get revenge. We continue to fight for equality, and we continue to get pushed back. Many of us, most of us, love this country, but sometimes this country does not love us back. So in closing, I ask this question. I'm going to start with you, Miss Andy. How do we fix it? How do we fix the cultural divide? More especially, how do we fix the racial problem? I don't expect you to have all the answers. I just want to know your answer.
Well, I mentioned my dad. My mother is now a pastor. My father's deceased. So I'm a preacher's kid as an adult. She became one when I was an adult. Anyway, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So it's not for us to take revenge, and we have to turn the other cheek. I fully believe that. And I think something we said early in the conversation is talking. We have to talk to our friends, our loved ones, our family. And we're not just, as Black people, we're not necessarily educating white people. Heather on this panel knows more than quite a few Black people. So it's not that. We're all just having to have a conversation with each other, talking to other people of color who may be misinformed or ignorant, to use the word you used earlier, Carl. So we need to talk to people. And I have to admit, I get stressed out and I'm exhausted, and I don't feel like seeing the racist posting of a childhood friend in social media, or I think I'm just going to delete all of them. We have to talk to people, or else we're not going to fix the problem. We have to start at ground zero.
Thank you. Miss Nicole, how do we fix it?
I think, as it was said earlier, America has to acknowledge the ugly truth about what this country was built on and how it affected people. I think the conversations need to continue to happen, but they can't just happen with people dismissing what they don't understand. And so I would plead to all of my white friends and all the white people watching, right? Just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it's not a real thing, doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, doesn't mean it's not frustrating. And so I think if we can all begin coming to the table, understanding that even the people that are we deal with on a day-to-day basis, they aren't the enemy. We all need to just come together, hear what's going on, have those conversations. We need leadership in place, no matter if it's in the church, on our jobs, in the government, to stop spewing hate. We need to stop misusing social media platforms just to get our agendas out. And we really need to come together like platforms like this, where we can have a conversation to hear each other out. And after the conversation, we have to put in the work. As people, white, black, brown, no matter what your background is, we have to put in the work. And that work is going to take time because we were built on so much hatred. And we have to take time to change it. And so I think, again, those conversations, coming to the table, leaning into those uncomfortable conversations, understanding that the people we work with, they're not the enemy. They may disagree with us, but we have a responsibility to work together, so that we can become better. And so it took a long time for us to get to this place. And I believe it'll take even longer to get out of it. But I do believe it can happen. But we can't ignore no one, no matter what race you are. We can't ignore the what's really happening in the world today.
Thank you so much. Mr. Tucker, how do we fix it?
I think for me, it's very simple. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Understanding, openness to listen and to learn, finding that closest point of reference, and then acknowledging, hey, this is the closest point of reference that I have, but that don't mean I can't continue to hear it out. I can't just dismiss it because I don't have the full experience of what you're going through. And then again, we can't get tired of teaching. It can be exhausting, it can be frustrating, but we can't stop because, hey, just because this one person didn't listen don't mean that the next one won't. And we have to find that little piece of God that's in everybody and interact with them. And I leave with the words of Malachi 2:10. Have we not all one Father? Have not one God created us? Why then do we deal treacherously one with another and profaning the covenant of our fathers?
Thank you, sir. Ms. Heather Hutchinson, how do we fix it?
So I think, I can only address white people. And I think that something that means a lot to me is that each of us have kind of what Nikki just said. We all have a platform. Each of us have a unique circle. We have a way that we interact with the world. We have unique personalities and ways that we share information. And, whether as white people, whether we know it or not, we have the attention of some people. People are watching, especially on social media, but also in the real world. It'd be nice if those two personalities match up as well, white people. But I think that it's really crucial for us, especially, to recognize that, yeah, absolutely, I can be angry, I can be upset, I can be grieved, but as a white person, my responsibility is to not muddy the waters with my emotional response. My responsibility is to use my platform wisely, to make sure that the information that I'm sharing is correct, but also, at the risk of sounding crass and making it sound business-like, to know your audience. I have people who are in my social media audience who are friends and family and coworkers, who know me at some level, on a personal level, and so they understand the way that I deliver information to the world. And I think to to maintain that integrity of continuing to share your thoughts and feelings in a way that is authentic to you really over time does make a difference. People can hear you if you are able to push your audience to the level that they're able to be pushed. On my social media, I'm very careful not to come out of the gate and share massive inflammatory things. And I don't reshare videos of people who are being killed. I don't think it's necessary. What I do is I harness the power of having people who are paying attention to me and do it in such a way that they're not going to run for the hills, and maybe they will hear. And I reserve some of that anger and that grief and that exhaustion for my close personal white friends and share it personally. I don't put that out to muddy the waters. I think we need to be very careful, especially that we are elevating the conversation and not destroying the conversation that's been happening. So I think for us, we need to be careful with what we say, use great wisdom, and make sure that it's being presented in a way that is honest, and also be aware of who our audience is. And each of us know what that looks like and how far we can push our particular audience. And then we also need to be elevating Black voices. I get really tired when I hear on videos where there's protesting or things going on, or when I've seen even panels like this where I see white people scurrying to be the first to respond and to answer. It's very frustrating for me as a white person to watch that, when the reality is I think that white people should be being the hands and feet right now to just make space. I'm speaking to you white people, but Black people don't need us to talk for them. They're more than capable of being very articulate, and our responsibility is just to step aside and kind of hold back some of the white people so that their voices can be heard over the noise that's been going on from us. So I don't want to add to the noise. I want to help elevate truth, and I want to help make space for truth.
Thank you so much. All of you have awesome replies. I feel almost inadequate, but I'll add my little 10-second clip. We have the little saying, what would Jesus do? I've never had a very good answer for that, but I'll tell you, I know what he did because it's recorded in the book. Everywhere he went, he didn't seek to melt into the culture. He realized that he was the fulfillment of the promise. So everywhere he was and everything that he did, he personified righteousness, holiness, truth, goodness, redemption, salvation. Even for those of you who are not Christians, even if you look at Jesus as just a good man, a prophet, look at his example, look at what he did. If we can take that example, not so much try to go and fit it in, but I was always taught that you must be the change that you want to see. Now, I know this will have very little effect on those who have a black heart and do not want their heart ever to be washed or to be clean. I fear for you because you shall have your day in judgment. But for those who want to do right, but maybe are afraid, or you don't want to bring into disrepair family relationships, friend relationships, I would say be bold, but use wisdom. The scriptures tell us that a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pitchers of silver. Use wisdom. And we have to be slow to speak and very quick to listen and observe, so that when we speak, we truly do speak as one having authority. Not one who thinks he or she has authority, but one who truly has authority because we've taken the time to look and listen and learn. So that's my 2 cents on that. I want to tell y'all that I think we did something special tonight. This was a painful conversation, but I think we managed to do it with grace. Would you agree? I want to say to the audience, if you have been enriched by this conversation, I would challenge you, whether you're watching by YouTube on Carl's Conversations, there is a treasure trove of videos that I've done over the past 4 or 5 months. Please go look through those. You'll find a variety of subjects. And I put the videos up there that I've done on other platforms. Also, I would encourage you, for those of you who follow me on Facebook, go look to my Facebook page. I post all the videos there so that those who are friends with me and follow me and see it. If you haven't followed me yet and you like what we're doing, please make tonight that you follow me so you can get notifications. If you have not already subscribed to the YouTube channel and this is the kind of conversations that you want to have, then please do that. I want to create a safe place where we can have difficult conversations. And that's why we named it Carl's Conversations. This panel is honored. I thank you, and I mean that. And those of you who know me know I'm not just one way on air, then we get off the air and I'm a whole different way. This is who I am. I'm so humbled because you could have been doing a lot of things on a Friday night on Labor Day weekend, but you decided to spend this hour and 25 minutes with me. And I appreciate it. And I thank your families for being very gracious with your time also. So if there's anything that anybody wanted to say that we didn't get a chance to say, I'm going to back off the mic and you have a chance to say it. All right. That means, go ahead.
Thank you for having us. Just thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Amen. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And listen, all of you have been on my platform before, and I would hope that you know that I'll be coming back to you again at some point. So thank you so much for your time and attention. And for my audience, I love you. I truly love you. And I'm learning that I have an audience, not just here, but in foreign lands also. So no matter where you are, no matter what your first language is, no matter what your culture is, no matter what your skin color is, no matter who your God is, I love you. And I hope that you're being enriched by what you're hearing here. So come on, be a part of the audience, comment, question, and maybe one day you can be a part of the panel. So until next time, I say, may God bless you and may heaven smile upon you. Good night.